So now you all know what real family engagement is. If you didn't know before, you absolutely know now. And that's the power. I'm going to go through the letters again. The R is for what? The E? About what? The A is for academics. And L is for leadership. Thanks, all the fellows, for your help there. And we've seen this real family engagement. We've seen it in every single one of our national fellows who are going back into their regions. And we see it right here in Washington, D.C. So what I thought we might do tonight is to continue the conversation about real family engagement. I'm going to invite you into my living room here at the beautiful Howard Theater. And we're going to go on a home visit. Because what we do at the Flamboyan Foundation is we teach educators how to meet families where they are and get to know them for who they are. And so I'm going to invite you to a home visit, but tonight's home visit is really special. They're all really special. But tonight we have 2 MVPs. The first MVP, you probably know him originally as the United States Secretary of Education under President Obama, Arne Duncan. But what you might not know is that in 2014, he was the co-MVP of the NBA All-Star Game. That's really what he's known for, right? And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because he's joined on stage by Ms. Wanda Durant, who is the mother of Kevin Durant, and she is the real MVP. Come on out, guys. Come join me.
Of course.
All right. So we're going to do a home visit. And I feel a little far away from you for this home visit, but we're good. So the first thing whenever we do a home visit, we train teachers, is to ask families what are their hopes and dreams for their child. And so I would love to start by asking each of you, Wanda, your boys are older now, but when they were in school, what were your hopes and dreams for your boys? And Arne, your kids are still in school. As you think about them, what do you hope and dream for them?
Well, when my boys were in school, I hoped and dreamed for a better future for them than I had perceived for myself. I wanted to give them the opportunity to expand their imagination, to widen their dreams, and I knew I had to do that through education. And so I was determined and I was intentional about their education. I knew exactly what it is that I wanted from them. And so that was my hopes and dreams, so that they can live the lives that they're living today.
Arne?
A couple things, and this is always a work in progress. You're never quite there, I think, as a parent. At least we're not there yet. But I think, one, to have our kids be empathetic, to really sort of understand the world around them. 2, it's really important to us that they be comfortable around all kinds of people. So we go to all kinds of different places. We've been to a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan. We've done lots of marches. My son is growing up playing basketball like I did, South and West Side, so he gets exposed to some great stuff and some really tough stuff, and it's all good. And just to be comfortable and confident around everybody. And then I'm always just honest. Our country's in a tough spot right now. That's my personal opinion, and people can and to be engaged civically for the rest of their lives, you can't be on the sidelines, and everybody has to step up. And I think the only good that may come out of this difficult time we're in as a country is that you can't take anything for granted. And things that I definitely took for granted, I was wrong. And so having them know that you have to be engaged forever.
Yep.
Those are the values I think that are most important to my wife and I.
Yep. Wanda, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm a new grandmother, and so I know, right? So I get to right some of the wrongs as a mom. And one of the things that I want to instill in my grandson is as Arne stated, the empathy for others, the value in himself as a person, to know that he is a part of the global citizenry and it's not just about him or the area in which he's grown up in. And how we do that is that we engage him in the world, not just merely by his phone, but just taking him around and being a part of what's happening in the world, making him aware of what's going on in the world, understanding that we are all different, but we are all the same, that we all have made mistakes. Therefore, it puts us all on the same playing field. We all want forgiveness, and we all want a second chance. And so there's still those things in him, I think, will help him to be a better global citizen.
That's amazing. I'm going to stick with you, Wanda, because I want to ask you, again, back in time, I'd love if you could share with us a story about a time when you had a really strong relationship with a teacher.
Yes.
And how that impacted either one of your boys' educations, and what did it mean to them to know that you had that powerful relationship?
Well, my son's, Kevin in particular, his fourth grade teacher was a black male. His name was Mr. Shepherd. And at that time, Kevin was a little uncertain as to how he was. We were uncertain as to how he was doing in school, how we can get him engaged a little more in school like he was in basketball. And Mr. Shepherd came in and really sat down with those boys and really talked to them and talked to me as a mother some of the things that he was going to support Kevin in, because I was a single parent. And I saw the light in my son come back for learning again. And to this day, Mr. Shepherd and our family are still friends. And so he had made an integral impact in Kevin's life. He re-emphasized that Kevin could learn, that he was special, and that he mattered to him as a student. And so Kevin believed that. And after Mr. Shepherd showed him that, Kevin just, it's like the light bulb went off in him again. And so I'm forever grateful to Mr. Shepherd for sparking the willingness to learn and be disciplined with his learning. And so I'm grateful for that.
And how did that feel to you?
It made me, I was able to trust his, again, I was able to put my trust in the school system, because at that point Kevin was my younger son and my oldest son. I just felt like they were being ushered along through the process, and I didn't really trust the administrators in my son's school, but he brought the trust back into me for my son's teachers. And so if he called me with the issue, I was his advocate, and my son knew that. And so it made me feel good that I could put my son in a place where I go to work and provide for my family, and I didn't have to worry about if he was going to be treated fairly or treated kindly, because Mr. Shepherd was there.
Arne, Wanda talks about feeling like her boys were just being sort of ushered through school. You've seen countless schools across the country, and what do you think about that? Like, what do you think about boys and girls just being pushed on through? And where have you seen family engagement potentially even work?
Well, I'll say one of the reasons I sort of devoted my life to this was there was a young man who I took a year out from college to work full-time with my mother and figure out, was this going to be my life's work, or is this a piece of who I was? And there's a young guy who was the star of the high school basketball team, was in between his junior and senior year, wanted some help, sort of SAT, ACT prep, be honor roll. And great kid, no gangs, no drugs, straight, real tough neighborhood, doing everything right. So I asked would I help tutor him. I said, great, no worry. He came in, and he was basically functionally illiterate. He was, second grade level, third grade level, whatever you might say. And that was one of those pivotal moments in my life, that here's a kid who played by all the rules, who did everything the system told him to do, and he was passed through. He was a much better player than I ever was. His dream was to go play Division I, and it just wasn't going to happen. And he had, the part that was hardest for me was that he had no clue. So he had been lied to, and his family had been lied to all their lives. And that is honestly one of the pivotal moments, that the unfairness of that, why I've tried to do what I do. How can family engagement change that? That's a larger, more complicated issue. I do think that the trust part that Wanda talks about is so hugely important. I think if you care about kids, you're honest with them and families about where they are. And if at some point along his journey in 3rd grade or 5th grade or 8th grade or freshman, at some point, if a teacher or administrator sat down with a family and said, you got a great young man, he's a great basketball player, but he needs some help reading, he needs some help with math, that would have changed his trajectory. So that missing piece was devastating.
And so, Wanda, let's think about that in relation to what you're working on now and how you're working in Prince George's County and that trust and that honesty.
Yeah.
You know, you're working with about 50 plus families in Prince George's County and really helping kids in an after-school program make sure that they're keeping their skills up. So talk more about that program that you're running, why you're running it, and how you see families as an integral part of it, and how that's connected to their teachers and that trust that's really needed.
Well, how I really found this passion of mine of educating students that come from areas that I've come from is as a public speaker, I would go around the country, around the world actually, and speaking to parents and mothers, and I would see single moms really kind of struggling with their children's education. And so I felt that I was going to take on this education system and I was going to educate our children. That was a joke.
Does anybody else want to take on the education system?
And so I realized that it was such a huge undertaking that I had to find a small niche that I could fall in love with and kind of hone my passions there. And so I decided to focus on early education because I felt that if we can arrest the illiteracy at the earliest onsets, to teach them the basics of reading, writing, phonics, and science, that will open their imagination and they could believe that they can learn. We have examples all over the world where we have very successful people who have come through so many obstacles but knew that they could learn and they could be something, and they persevered. And so it's not always so much the environment that you come from that prevents you. Is what I found prevents us is that we don't believe that we can. Mm-hmm. And so we teach our children that they can learn and that they are valuable to the educators to be taught. They can believe that no matter what situation they come through, they will strive. Thank you. Like my sons come from single parent household, and statistics say that they were going to fall by the wayside. But I was different, and so I instilled that in my children, and no matter what the obstacles were, they still persevered, and I persevered as a parent. And so that's my focus now. So what I do is on Saturdays, 3 Saturdays a month, starting October to May, we have a Saturday Academy where we teach the fundamentals of reading, writing, phonics, science, for an hour, one-to-one student-teacher ratio. We have certified educators, reading specialists, former principals, vice principals who volunteer their time to teach our students. And what I found is if parents consistently bring their children to the program, they definitely improve. Mm-hmm. We've had some IEPs changed, reconsidered, restructured, and so the program works. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think it's important if the parents, for me, when I was a parent, I was intentional about engaging. I was intentional about being present, but what I realized is that not every parent has the same scenario or situation that they can follow. It's not the same as mine or other parents. And so I realized that we have to be a little more lenient and empathetic about a parent's situation, so that not to give up because they don't fit into our little paradigm of how we think it's supposed to be.
Okay, we're going to get back to that in just a few moments.
Okay.
But Arne, I do want to ask you, when you think about paradigms and you think about the work that you're doing in Chicago right now, I think you're doing some of the toughest work right now in communities, and you're working with young men who are at risk of, as you say, either shooting or being shot. And clearly, the education system has failed some of these men. and their families were obviously not actively engaged in their education. Can you talk a little bit about what education, though, means for them now as they think about raising their own children?
Yeah, this is the toughest work I've ever done, honestly the most heartbreaking sometimes, but also the most inspiring. And it's not just, and every guy's story is different, so it's hard to characterize or generalize, but I will say many of our young men at age 12 or 13 became the man in their home. Dad was locked up or gone, mom was on crack or alcoholic, and they had to start making money. And all of us in nice places like this were absent from their lives, and the only person hiring was the guy in the corner. And that life inevitably leads to violence. One young guy said, I got tired of hearing my mother cry at night, and I had to go do what I had to go do. Another guy, the youngest I know, he said, Arne, I started selling drugs at 9 years old. And he said that was really hard. I'm like, I bet it was. And the thing, Kristin, I've learned is that they made really rational choices because they didn't have other choices. And I was the eldest of three. I had two great parents. We had a roof over our head. We had food. We had books. But if I had none of those things and I had to provide for my sister and brother, I can't say what I would have done or wouldn't have done. And so every system failed them. The families failed them. Schools failed them. Churches failed them. Nonprofits failed them. One people didn't fail them were the drug dealers. They were there. They're present. Rain or shine, on the corner, cold Chicago winter, they're there. And there's always work for a young kid. You can always be a runner. You can always be a lookout. Like, it's never full employment. There's always, they create a family that doesn't exist. So all the traditional institutions in society let folks down. All we're doing now, it's late. It's 17 to 24-year-olds, and many of our guys have been shot, and many of our guys honestly have shot others. But we're just giving them a second rational choice, and they're choosing it. And some people say it's great you're giving people a second chance. Actually, don't. I think in most cases we're giving guys a first chance. And they made a rational choice at 12 or 13. And many of them talked about had they had these kinds of opportunities and life coaches and mentors and all the stuff we do now, trauma counseling, had they had those things at a younger age, their lives would have been, dramatically different.
Yeah.
That's pretty sobering.
It's real.
Yeah.
It is real. And it's the conditions that, it's not just Chicago. It's D.C., it's Dallas, it's Memphis, it's Atlanta, it's Milwaukee, it's Utah, it's Prince George's County. It's pervasive. What's it going to take to actually change something? Because it's the systems that have been created this way. What's it going to take to make these changes, do both of you think?
These are all good questions. I'll say Chicago's, it is everywhere. Chicago is uniquely bad. Chicago's 7 times more violent than New York, 3.5 to 4 times more violent than LA. I'm always very careful. We work with some amazing individual police officers, but structurally, trust of the community and police are broken. So no crimes get solved. So if you commit homicide in Chicago, that has a 17% clear rate. So that means you have an 83% chance of literally getting away with murder. So no one is safe. Everyone's carrying guns to protect themselves, not necessarily to be active shooters, but we call it playing defense. You can't talk about this without talking about race. If more of those victims looked like her son and less like my son, it would not be tolerated. Chicago's a city of neighborhoods. Downtown is beautiful. Hyde Park, where I live, is nice. Lincoln Park, but South and West Sides, it's war zones. I don't say that. They are war zones. Everybody knows people have been killed. Everybody. Every kid growing up knows people have been killed. So unless we talk about race, unless we talk about systemic disinvestment and redlining, I always say I don't think I'm trying to solve a crime problem. I'm trying to solve an economic problem. It's jobs. It's a chance to make. These are men. They're going to make a living. So these are really important, difficult structural things, and you got to try and take all of them on at once. The last piece, not to go on too long, is that guys with backgrounds, guys with felony backgrounds, guys with violent felony backgrounds, if we refuse to give them a chance to make money in the legal economy, if we lock them out, they're going to have to make money in the illegal economy, and that inevitably leads to violence.
Yeah.
So we have about 40 employers who are hiring at the back end. We have 2 of our guys working at law firms, which is crazy. One of our guys is at Deloitte. But we have to have those kinds of opportunities, or else they have no choice but to go back to doing what they've done their whole lives.
Yeah. I think we just doing what we're doing now, kind of arresting the condition in which these children are facing. And like Arne, those who have been in this condition for such a long time, like he said, give them a first chance. But we have to be willing as a community to take the necessary steps to get in there and get the work done. Not just talk about it and get it done. How do we do that? We just have to be committed and dedicated to the process.
Yep.
Because we all know someone who's affected by these type of conditions, all of us. It's not just isolated to the black communities anymore. It's all of the communities that are facing some type of trauma that we need to address.
So an undercurrent of what both of you are saying is this concept of listening and like really deep listening. I'm wondering, how do you think of yourselves as good listeners? And how do you know if you're a good listener?
Well, sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not.
No, that's real.
Sometimes you just need to do what I say because it works. I'm evident of that. And so just follow instructions. Can you listen? I just lighten the mood a little bit. That's so, Arne, go ahead.
No, that was good. I liked that.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
I know. I'm like leaning in. I'm listening.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know whether I'm good or bad. That's for somebody else to judge. I will say, I mean, it's interesting. I see that the set here, with many of our guys, I start by doing a home visit. And it actually blows people away that I'll walk into these homes by myself and no security, no nothing. Mm-hmm. And we close curtains, we go to the basement with certain things we do to try and maintain safety, but to show that you're willing not just to listen, but to meet people on their own turf. And to have teachers do that, it sounds like a basic thing, but it's actually revolutionary. And for me, the trust that builds, you can't put a price on that. And so is there some risk? Yes. There's some situations that are not the safest? Yes. But that for me is beyond worth it, because that when you go sit in someone's house and spend time with them, doesn't matter what you say, doesn't even matter what the conversation is, that's sending a message that everybody understands.
Yep.
That's true. I had a chance to visit a family not long ago, and they were from the communities that I had grown up in, and when I was able to walk into their home and just let them know I'm not Kevin Durant's mom, I'm not the real MVP, I'm just Wanda, I'm just here to engage with you and your family and to be a part of your family for a few hours. And I can sense that their defenses had come down, and they just welcomed me into their family. And so when we come in and to be serious about, I am a good listener, and so and I do give good advice. So, but when we're willing to really just be people with each other, that's all that really matters. It's not about our status or what we do, what we have. It's just that we have to be able to just be human with one another. I think that's important.
But that just is so critical in education, right? Like teachers and families don't always see educators as people. And certainly when we were talking with families across the city before we started this work, we heard a lot of, they don't even see me. They don't even see me. And so it's going to take a lot of relationship building, a lot of listening, a lot of conversations in order for us to surmount these massive barriers that we have created, frankly, for our families. And so as we think about that, I would love to know from each of you, Wanda, and this gets back to what you were saying a little while ago around meeting families where they are. What advice do you have for educators and school systems about how to best engage families?
Well, one of the things that I would suggest is that you have to realize that each family dynamic is different. There is not a blanket way to introduce engagement to a particular family. How to determine the method used would be to go out to visit the family, to get to know the family. And I know it's unlikely that a teacher will go out to engage with every student's family the same way. So what I would suggest is create a grouping, the same type of situation or scenario. Create a method for engagement and then implement that plan. Bring in the resources necessary to help the parents to be engaged, help the school system to be engaged. That you are the liaison between the system and the parents, and it has to work. And then we need to support our teachers more. And give them the willingness, the financial support in particular, to go out and do these things because they do care for our children and they do want the best for them. But they have families too. They have to be engaged with their children as well. So we have to create a dynamic of how to do this and how to make it work. Use non-traditional ways. Go to the house and visit. Use social media. Use a portal. Use whatever you need to use to engage a parent, because you may have a parent who has 2 part-time jobs, who can't come during the day, who can't come in the evening because they're working, and if they don't work, they don't get paid. If they don't get paid, there's nowhere to stay or no food to eat. And so those different dynamics need to be considered. And so my suggestion would be to have the empathy for each student, but create like programs for each type of situation.
And Arne, the question is flipped to you, not about systems, but more about families. When you think about families, what's your advice to them in terms of accessing teachers and accessing schools?
And I'll do that. Let me quickly just build, because I think what Wanda said was so important, that many of us are sort of in this not just to educate, but to try and end cycles of poverty. Why are kids poor that we're working with? Because their families are poor. No kid chooses to be poor. Why are families poor? Generally, not always, because the parents didn't receive a good education. So school was not necessarily the most successful or fun or inviting place for parents. And so for us just to think parents are going to be comfortable and confident walking into schools, there's a lot of failure back there. There's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of not feeling cared for and supported. And so trying to be very aware of that, us as school leaders, us as educators, that not everyone had a fantastic time, and if the only time you're hearing from a teacher is when your child messes up, are you calling home and saying, Kevin did a great job, Kevin's doing better, he's concentrating better, his reading's getting better, his math. Those touch points are so important. So it really is a paradigm shift, and just the old way of working, I don't think works for almost anybody, but it really doesn't work for the kids and families who historically have been disenfranchised by an education system that didn't work for them. So on the parent side, it's a fascinating one. The challenge I think we always have is often parents who haven't received a great education don't even quite know what it looks like. Every parent wants the best for their child. I've never met a parent that didn't want the best for their child. And parents are very, very, very in tune with their child's strengths and weaknesses of what they need, but they don't always know what a great education looks like. And so how we physically tour schools, how we do virtual tours, how do we let parents know what great education looks like and not be scared of empowering them? I think sometimes it's a little more convenient to keep parents a little bit more ignorant, a little bit more in the dark. And so how do we give them the knowledge? And then when they have the knowledge, when they know, they're going to demand it. They're going to demand it. But they have to have some sense of what's possible. And so I think we have to meet them halfway to create that demand. I think we need, as educators, we need more pressure from parents. We need more parents knocking down our doors saying the dropout rate is too high and not enough of our kids are going to college and not enough of our kids are succeeding. We don't quite have that demand. And I think it's incumbent upon us to try and create that. It's a healthy pressure. We should have that pressure on us.
Yep.
But I think we need to, as you said, Arne, parents don't know what a good education looks like. And so maybe we need to educate a parent. Maybe the parent needs to be re-educated. One of the students, one of the fathers in the program that I have, he went to one of our educators and said he couldn't read. But he wanted the best for his son, because so he would bring him every Saturday morning to this program. So what do we do for this father who can't read? We need to figure out the resources needed to educate the holistic family. And I think that's what the program is all about, is how do we engage the entire family? Because this is the dynamic or the environment in which this child is coming from. And so this is what they're bringing to school every day. And how do we fix that? How do we help?
So we have to wrap up soon, but before we do, I want to ask you both, what gives you hope when you think about all of the things that we've talked about? What keeps you going? What gives you hope? And what can you share with all of us to keep all of us going and to keep us hopeful?
What gives me hope is that we're all here, that we're all engaged in the process to try to figure it out. So we have some of the answers, and we're going to implement the tools necessary to answer those questions that we've answered. To use the tools that we have to fulfill the answers that we've gotten. We're in it every day to try to figure out what else we can do. I think what gives me hope is that we're not quitting. We know that our communities need help, and there's many of us who are in this room and aren't in this room that's willing to commit ourselves to the process of helping humanity. So that's what gives me hope. And some of us are doing it right, and some of us are trying to figure it out, and some of us need a little help. And so, but we're all in it together, regardless of where we stand. So that gives me hope. Thank you.
I'm always actually super hopeful and optimistic, and the work is hard and tough, but again, whether it's when I was here in DC and traveling the country and seeing schools in 50 states, and now back home in Chicago and in schools all the time, we just have amazing kids. We have unbelievable kids who are resilient, who are hardworking, who are striving to do extraordinary things in very, very difficult circumstances. So ultimately, young people give me hope. And I'll tell you, with the young men I'm working with now who have been through such horrific trauma and of what they have done and what's happened to them and what they've seen, to see their commitment to not just transforming their lives, but transforming communities, to see their ability to forgive and to reconcile, it's beyond hopeful, it's beyond inspiring. We've got a million crazy stories, but we get guys out of the city on the most violent weekends just to try and keep them alive. So we actually, Labor Day weekend, brought guys to DC here, 80 of our young men. As it happened, we have groups from all over the city. One of our guys had shot the other a while back. And the guy who was shot, the victim, went and made peace with the guy who shot him, here in DC. That's I don't know if I could have the heart to do that, or compassion to do that, but the people who have been through so much, who have done so much, to have the ability to forgive and move forward, we got to have hope. We got to have hope.
And one other thing, one of my kids, this gives me hope, and I just remembered it looking at one of my education director out here. One of my kids in the program, he realized he can read. And he bounced out of class that day and told her he was going to live his best life. So, and you can see the blossom in him because he realized he can read. And so that gives me hope as well.
Wow. I mean, I know we would all love to spend like 2 more hours up here chatting with you and inviting all of you to ask questions, but I think we're gonna leave us all wanting more. But I can't tell you how grateful I am to both of you for joining us tonight and sharing your stories and sharing your experiences. As you said, what's hopeful is that we're all in it together. Mm-hmm. And that not any one of us can do it alone, and that we all need one another. And so I share in the hope that both of you just expressed, the hope of a child, the hope of a young man, the hope of our collective work together. Yes. And so just please know how grateful I am, and I hope will you all join me in extending our gratitude to Arne and Wanda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Truly. I feel really short right now.
Thank you.
Truly.